Welcome, everybody, to the Wonder Boldly podcast. I'm Christine Santos, bringing to you all of the action steps and knowledge I've learned on my journey to becoming an online business owner, quit my corporate job, and now live the life that I desire on my own terms. This podcast is jam-packed with all the knowledge I've gained over the past few years growing my online business. I am so passionate about you going after what it is that you want. I want to encourage and motivate you to know that you too can live the life that you desire. Thank you so much for listening. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wonder Boldly. Today I have with me Sarah Jansel, and she has graciously offered to come onto the podcast. You know me, I reached out to her and asked her to come on because she inspires me every day. She is somebody who was also in corporate like myself. She was a VP in corporate, loved her corporate job, if you listen to her story, and also throughout her life desired to have her own air quotes thing. And she went through iterations of thinking about it like we all do. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, and just was nagging at her for a while. And then finally, one day she said, yes, this is something I'm going to do. She didn't immediately leave her corporate job like myself. We just go through those motions. And I think people like Sarah and I get asked a lot, like, when was that moment where you decided you were going to do it? And I'll let Sarah answer that question, but I think it's pretty similar in that there isn't a moment. So if you're sitting there listening to this and waiting for that moment, the advice I would give, and I'll ask Sarah to give her advice, but is not to wait for that moment. Take a step forward, do something little. Maybe you do your LLC. Maybe you don't, maybe that seems really big to you, but it's every step that we take to move closer to something that we're desiring. And we might not even be sure we know the picture of what that is, right? We might not even be sure. And I can tell you, and Sarah will tell you as well, many iterations happen along the way. So I'm so excited to have her on. She has an amazing story, and we'll get into that a little bit. And she has an amazing business. And the people that I reach out to, I feel wholeheartedly confident in referring them to people, helping them market their business, because we're all here supporting each other, small businesses, and trying to make a difference in the world. And so when you hear Sarah and her story and what she has to offer, if you are interested in working with Sarah, we'll leave all of her information. Please reach out to her. I 100% support Sarah in her vision, in the work that she does, and you will be in good hands. So with all of that said, thank you so much for being with us here today, Sarah. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm gushing over here. Who is this person you're talking about? I'm like, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I mentioned a little bit about your story, and I would love if you would dive into that. Tell us a little bit about how you started your own business, Jansel and Co. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of your business, tell us a little bit about you and how you started on this journey.
Yeah, for sure. Again, thanks for having me here. I feel like, gosh, where to even start? Like, how much time do we have today? I would say it's interesting how you introduce things there a little bit, where you said like waiting for the moment and having these sparks or thoughts about what the future could possibly hold for you. And I think it's normal to wonder what else could be, and you're given one kick at the can here. We're always thinking about using our time wisely. And I would say for years that would have been me, where I had this life. I was working in corporate banks, consulting firms, tech companies, like the whole nine yards, and life was pretty good at that time. And going through school, getting the MBA, like doing all the typical things, and was really chasing after this better version of myself, I guess I would say. And, at that time, that really looked like certain jobs, and also I was quite young as well, and really wanted this like VP jobs. But all the while that was happening, so it's like I had all these aspirations, I was highly motivated, I was going to do all the things, I had all these dreams. But there's that left and right side of your brain. And the side of my brain that loved the corporate stuff also was like, hey, but what about all this like creative stuff that you love to do? Like cooking, fashion, creating art. I was in different fashion shows. I did acting gigs. There were a lot of things that were very non-corporate. And I kept those like versions of myself, I would say, very separate from one another. And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh gosh, I know exactly what you mean. There was kind of like work corporate Sarah, and then there was like Sarah. And I do feel like they were different people in a way. And I almost felt like I had to do that to keep up this persona, if you will, about how I wanted to be perceived by the world when it came to being a professional. And so I think over the years, those things tended to collide a bit because the creative side of me would have all of these ideas over the years, over a glass of wine with my husband or going on a vacation, or those moments where you have time and the thoughts start to creep in. And for me, the thoughts were always about, what if I did something different? What if I did something creative? I always wanted to dabble in being an entrepreneur. But just as quickly as those things would come up, and trust me, the business ideas I had, there were probably 100 or more, like what that could be. I never really landed on something, daydreaming. But in the morning or the next day or after the glass of wine was done, it was very easy for me to realize, oh, I have this great life right now. Like, why would I throw that all away? Yeah. And, it's an interesting perspective. So I have a keynote and I talk about a lot of these things. And I wish I had someone back then to tell me, it's like, you have this perception that you're going to throw all of these things away that we worked on, or that somehow they're going to be diminished or they're going to disappear or things like that. And I know even when I left my corporate job, I had these fears, but I wish someone had told me that these things that I had done to that point were actually the perfect training that I needed to actually be successful in the thing that I did. And if I didn't do those things, then maybe I wouldn't have acquired those skills. I think at the end of the day, it wasn't until, I'm going to say 2018, I finally got that VP job and I was really excited and all the things. And even though I had gotten that job, it occurred to me that it was like there was still something missing. And most people should be like, oh my gosh, like someone needs to practice their gratitude here, right? Like, think about, look at all the things you did to get here. But there was still something missing. I ended up deciding that I was going to start something. I went on a vacation with my husband the month that I got promoted and things were going well. You mentioned it earlier, like I loved my corporate job. I still have a huge passion for those things and always said, you never know where life will take you. People are multi-passionate. But I do feel there was just this thing. So we go on this vacation and I basically say to my husband, okay, this is it. Here's the deal. So I got this gig. And I'm still feeling like something's missing, like drawing a line in the sand. Literally, I think it's time that I explore this thing that I keep talking about, that I never put my money where my mouth is on. And what do I really have to lose here? So it started out as a side hustle and registering a business. Like you said, okay, I just take one step forward. So we're just going to register a business. Okay, great. It's going to be in fashion because I love that. And people always ask me where my clothes are from and all those things. And so I feel like naturally people might gravitate towards that. It might make sense in my world. And so then I took it to my closet and was like, what are all the brands that I love that I'm ordering? Because here in Canada, I was actually ordering everything from the US because I was like, gosh, trust me, I'm looking out my snow-filled window right now. We need a lot of those California vibes. So that was the thing that I went with. So there's these little things that I did. And I ended up building a business on Shopify and learned everything I could about it. And fast forward a couple years later, I was looking to scale that business. And of course, it's March of 2020. We all know what's happening at that time. And I'm thinking about the next thing and what's going well. And I'm still at my corporate job. And then I start to realize that I have these skills and capabilities that people need. And so I took on a couple of clients to help them build their online presence, their Shopify websites, the whole 9 yards. And it suddenly hit me. And I'm sure there's probably been a moment, Christine, where this has happened to you, where it was like, I was always thinking about it in terms of like business as being one thing and creative as a separate. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Here's a situation where I'm taking the creative aspect of building something beautiful and cool and carving out a lot of that white space and helping people show up and look good online. but there's so many business fundamentals that are going to be required to actually make this thing go. And so now these things, I see how they fit perfectly together.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't imagine that in my old life, which is crazy because I look
Mm-hmm.
back and I think, no, that it totally was. I just didn't see it that way. But it was that made me take the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to jump all in. And literally after 2 months, wrote out my resignation letter, went full in and was like, if I don't do this, I'm never going to do it. So there wasn't a moment. It was just if I don't do this, I'm never going to do it. And I didn't want to have that regret. And I always thought, you know what? If it's not what I thought it was going to be, if it's not what lights me up, then I'll just do something else. So
Right.
anyway, I'll stop
Exactly.
there. But
Oh, that was great. I was on the edge of my seat and I have chills. So one of the things that you said there was, and it really revolves around belief. And I know you feel strongly about beliefs, and I've listened to that podcast episode that you did about it. It was a while ago. I don't know the number. I'll do the research and put it in the show notes for people to listen to. But so the belief system, so the belief that you can do something different, the belief that you're going to be okay, the belief that, yes, I've just gotten that VP job that I wanted. Everything is great, but I still want something different, more, whatever the right adjective is, and the belief that you can do it. And I think that is so powerful. So one of the things that you said there that I want to ask about is your husband. Here you have this belief system, whether at that time you were totally aware of it or it came later, but it was still there because throughout your childhood, throughout your life, you used to say, this isn't my life, right? And having that belief that there was something different for you and being able to live in that belief is really important, I believe, and having boundaries about how you navigate in the world with your beliefs, because there are the naysayers, and that's okay. And they're there to love us and to protect us. And I'm not talking about like people on the internet. I'm talking about our loved ones who just want to protect us, right? So how did your husband feel when you said on vacation, I'm going to do this?
So I would say I'm very lucky in the sense that he's a big Sarah supporter. And I feel like sometimes I'm almost like, don't support me that much. What if this is a terrible idea? But he doesn't believe that's going to be the case for me. So I think I'm very fortunate in the sense that I've selected someone to be a part of my life that has big hopes and dreams for me and actually probably believes in me more than I do a lot of times. And I can easily get off track. He will also pull me back down sometimes. This week we had this funny conversation about where he's like, I think you're letting your ego get in the way. And I was like, oh, I'm so mad about that, but you're so right. So he'll build me up, but he'll also be like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Maybe you're like building yourself up a little bit too much here. Lucky for me, I think he always thought that I should do something else. And not to say that I wasn't doing the things that I did because he fully supported me. Heck, when I worked at banks, consulting firms, the whole nine yards, we lived in London, Ontario. So that is close to the US border in Michigan, where the Blue Water Bridge is. And that was home base. That was where we met. And then I moved him to Toronto. And then I moved into Vancouver. And then I went to India by myself for a bit. And then we moved back to Toronto. And then I'm like, okay, let's move back to London. And like all the travels and things that were in between that, me going to the US for jobs and things like that. And all of those times he was just along for the adventure because it was like fun. And we were doing things and he supported that. So I feel like that was really important to me. I think maybe, and it's not something I've ever really talked about. Nobody's ever asked about him. So this is interesting, but I would say I feel fortunate that I've found someone who just gets that and is, hey, no, I just trust and believe that if you say you're going to do something, you're not going to do it for no good reason, and we'll figure it out. And I think he's seen me just figure it out. And a lot of that comes from being young and being out on my own from the age of 16 years old. What the heck did I know? So he's trusting that this person who was able to figure that out, it's like she could probably figure out a business, and if not, she'll find something else. So
Right.
I don't want to say that lightly, but I do feel like I've been very fortunate. Even if I said tomorrow I was going to do something crazy, he'd be like, all right.
Yeah.
I trust that you know what you're doing.
That's so good to hear. And I love those stories. And I feel very fortunate I have that as well.
Mm,
And sometimes I think, just like you said, maybe you believe in me too much. Hold on.
yeah. Wait a minute, you do, but
Wait
now
a-
I'm starting to second guess myself.
right. Wait a minute. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
gravity.
Right. So we're very fortunate in that. And I think that obviously I see it in you and your story here. And I know for myself that does help keep us propelled and keep us moving forward. And that's really just a wonderful gift. So you've got a great support system in your husband, and that's wonderful. And you also have life experiences that propel you forward, that you can turn to and say to yourself, okay, well, I've been here and this was really tough, and I was able to come up with something, a solution, or move past it. And I think that builds our confidence. That helps us with our beliefs. So will you tell us a little bit about your story of a young person and some of those things, the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I think you and I met probably around the time that I started thinking about actually talking about this. And it was interesting. I gave a keynote speech last year, and it was the first time, it was like, I felt like it was my coming out party. It was the first time that I couldn't count on maybe one hand the number of people who actually knew my story. And that's crazy when you think about it. It's not that I'm not an open book. I'll talk about a lot of things, but there were a lot of things that I just didn't talk about too. And, I really didn't feel comfortable doing that. And I mentioned this earlier, and I think it's an important theme, which is I felt like there were two versions of myself. And I really cared about how I showed up, and not just how I showed up, but how I was perceived. And, I think I put a false level of importance on that. And what's interesting that here we are today, and now we're going to actually delve into this and kind of talk about it. I think it's important for me to say that because I know a lot of times when I'm meeting people and they're thinking about whether it's their corporate life, whether they're building a business, if there's something of importance, it's like those little scaries, I'm going to call them, creep out. And for me, that's been like a consistent theme. And I think it's something I've really worked on the past couple of years, and I've just been able to let it go. But I recognize when it creeps in, and it's usually when I start to be worried about how I'm going to show up, or am I going to be able to do the thing, and like my level of self-confidence. So that all stems from when I was 16 years old. I ended up being homeless. And I grew up in a home with a single mother of three children, and she had a lot of things she was dealing with, and mental wellness and also health wellness, all the things. Like, she just was not well. And it just so happened that there was a series of events that kind of happened, and she was quite triggered, and it ended up that she just couldn't deal with it. So there I was, and she packed up my belongings in a green garbage bag, literally. And I was over at my friend's house, and she literally zoomed up to the house in her car and dropped my things on the front lawn and took off. And that was the beginning of my life. I want to say there were a lot of things that happened before that helped me grow up quickly. But this one in particular, I think, is like the antithesis of when you talked about earlier, when you know that moment. I'm like, this was the moment. And I talk a lot about this in my keynote speech because it was that moment where I realized this is not my life. And this is a saying, because you asked me about this earlier, something that I had said to myself throughout the years. And it was whenever something just didn't feel right. And I had a gut feeling. And I think we all have that gut feeling. But I think when you go through trauma, it gets stronger. Now, whether or not we listen to that, and we believe in that gut feeling and we act on it, I think is another thing. And so I had this situation, it happened to me, and I literally thought to myself, this is the moment. I can either be homeless or I can be success and like actually make something of myself. And I'll tell you what, I'm not going to be homeless. I said I wasn't going to swear on here, but I'm like, this is the thing that I'm passionate about. And it was a long road from there. I figured it out. Luckily, the friend who I stayed there for a couple of weeks. I had to figure out what the heck I was going to do. I ended up moving in with someone and offering to babysit their kids. So I had money for rent and food. I was going to school. I was in high school. I was in grade 11 when this happened. And there's a number of beliefs and things that I talk about in my keynote speech about recognizing the ceiling that we're putting on ourselves. And usually those ceilings are our own. But I ended up having to quit high school because I was in a crappy situation, and I never talked about that before. That was like a coming out party for sure. I did go back. I did figure out that there was something called night school. I put myself through that. I graduated. I got myself a good job at a bank. I got an MBA, like all of these things. But all of those things were done on the thinking that I was like, that just wasn't going to be good enough for me. having my things in a green garbage bag and like having this crappy hand kind of dealt to me these things that at the time I don't think I realized were fully out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
I took a lot of responsibility for those things. And so back then, I was actually quite a creative person, right? Like I was going to school, I was going to be in art school. I talked about doing, believe it or not, forensic art for the police station and doing portraits and like all these things, painting bank murals and all kinds of things. And so this was a very pivotal moment for me where I was like, starving artist right now is just a no. And so down the path of business, I found a lot of really great mentors and people who obviously believed in me and things over the years. But I think this is where we start to see, and this is just my, like the creative and the business and how those things collide and then why they became separate and like the whole 9 yards. But I think everybody has that thing where there's like something you really want to do, but you just can't see it like operating in this world that you need to operate in to pay the bills, like do the thing, right? So I think everybody has a little something like that where it's like, but I still want to dabble over here, but I just don't see how they're going to fit together. And so I think when I had that opportunity much later in life, like I built this life, like I wasn't a starving artist, I graduated, did all the things, and then I was quite comfortable. And so I thought to myself, this is why it's now or never. Because a lot of those choices I think I made over the years, I consciously made them, but I made them because I felt like I needed to survive. And it occurred to me that I didn't need to survive anymore. Like I was thriving, not just surviving. And so I think that for me, that's why leaving and being an entrepreneur was so important, and doing the work that I do with others to help them bring their dream businesses to life and helping them build, brand, and grow the thing that they are really passionate about has been so intrinsic in me. And it's interesting because over the past 3.5 years or so since I've been out, it's actually also occurred to me that was already what I was doing. I was just doing it under a different package. And so it's in this like interesting, like roundabout circle of things that's come up for me to say, sometimes we need to take a step back or remove ourselves from a situation for perspective. So anyways, that's a whole lot to say on kind of parts and pieces of my story, but I have some really strong beliefs about when we feel like we're not aligned, when things happen to us and we don't deserve those things, and we should keep going because it will work out. And also recognizing that we don't have to separate ourselves from the things that we love when those things happen. It just might be our for now plan, not our forever, you know?
Yeah. I love that. Our for now plan and not our forever. Yeah. So you use the word deserve. Do you, at that time, not now, when you were young, 16, a teenage girl, did you feel like you deserved what your mother did?
That's a good question. I don't think so. No, I think I was pretty darn ticked off about it.
Okay. Yeah.
But I also don't know that I knew what I deserved at that time. I think it took me a long time to figure that out. Yeah, that's a good question. I might have to reflect on that a little bit more, but I do feel like I was pretty ticked off about it. And my immediate sort of like flight or fight was to be, I'll show you. No. So I'm going to say my answer to that is no. I didn't think I deserved that, but I don't know if I knew fully what I deserved.
And is your mother still alive? Are you in contact with her? How does that relationship look now?
Yeah, no, for sure. I always say I love my mom. She had a lot to deal with. I think her own inner stuff to deal with. I now see that as a kid, that's really hard to see and not really appreciate. Now I think back and I feel sorry for her. Like I feel bad that, oh my God, to have to get to that point, that was like a pretty dark place. But yeah, no, we're good. She's still not well. She's in a long-term care facility, but my brother and I, we look after her, and she's a different person now, that's for sure. But it's been a long road for her.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And you have so your brother and another sibling?
Yep. I've got an older sister. She's 6.5 years older. So like almost a whole lifetime when you're a kid.
Yeah. So are you all three of you close, or just you and your brother? How does that work? How does the sibling relationship work?
Yeah, for sure. Brother, sister, all that. I feel like my brother and I are very close, but also we were very close in age, and it was a little bit different. My sister had moved out by this point.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
So how would you sum up that story? Like we went there in regards to confidence and belief in things that we go through that bring us to where we are today, and that will continue throughout our lives. How would you sum up that story for yourself and how it brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that a lot of times people want to start businesses because they wanted to do something a really long time ago and they didn't act on it. Is typically what I've seen. It's not always the case, but it's usually the case. And I would say like 99% of times, my ideal clients are when people are starting businesses, myself, maybe even you, Christine, it'd be interesting to hear you. But I think there's like a version of ourselves that we just haven't been able to realize. And so our ideal customer is often us too, right? Like we've gone through something and therefore we see an opportunity and we're like, we're going to fulfill that need. And so I think just thinking about who might be listening to this podcast, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to highlight that we all go through hard things. And I think we all have dreams and aspirations, and then life happens. And it can be difficult to see the forest through the trees on some of those things. And I think a lot of times we get into life and we have responsibilities and we have homes and we have spouses and we have all these things that we're accountable for. And it starts to hold all of this importance. And we can't possibly see ourselves taking a step in a different direction because of all of the things that we've built that might still need to be. And so I think my message to you is if you see that in yourself, or you know that there have been little strings of light on things that you've wanted to do over the years, to give yourself permission that's okay. And like you had highlighted earlier, it's not like I just took a jump and was like an entrepreneur overnight or anything like that. That's not true at all. There were lots of little things that I did along the way. And in fact, most of them were built in corporate. And then I started to dip my toe in, oh, I'll just try this fashion thing, or, oh, I'll just do this, or, oh, I'll hire a coach, and like all those things. And it kind of led me to a point where there was just a really great market opportunity, to be honest, in 2020, that I was like, if I don't take this jump now, this is silly. But even that today, I think about what I had said earlier about like, I've actually been thinking about like how some of the skills that I've been using, it's, man, I've got all these things that I help corporations with. Should I be doing that in this new capacity too? Should I be thinking about my customer a little bit differently? Am I just one-sided? I think the answer to that is no. And are there multiple things and multiple types of people that I could be looking at and working with today? I think I got caught up along the way in the I can only be one thing. I don't really think that's true for people, especially in this day and age. They call it like the gig economy for a reason. You know, you just need to be a little more open-minded about who you are and what you want to do, and give yourself permission. That's okay. And hopefully that was what I was able to do today.
Thank you. So tell us about your business and what you offer.
Yeah, so we build, brand, and grow awesome websites, primarily on Shopify, also on Subly and Kajabi. So if you're a subscription boxer, that would be Subly. And if you're a service provider, that would be on Kajabi. So I run my business on both, and our team members run their businesses on some of those platforms. I feel it's really important to work with people who actually get it and run their own business and understand, so that they can be the best at what they do and help others as well. And so we offer a full range of services. I started out doing mostly consulting and showing people how, but now we primarily offer done for you services. And we do everything from logo to web design, redesign, custom work, paid marketing, SEO, all the things that you would need essentially to like get that business started and grow it. And we're really passionate about that. We love the entrepreneurs we work with, and we love bringing their stories to light. And that was really one of the biggest inspirations for me, was just seeing how others needed to get out there. Think about your About Us page, and when someone asks you to talk about yourself and why you want to do the thing that you do. After I started seeing that, I was like, gosh, I better put on my big girl pants and get out there and have some courage. So we're just really passionate about bringing those stories to life.
So the clients that you have, are they small business owners for products, for services? Give us a picture. So if somebody's listening, the reason I'm asking the question, if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking about starting a business, maybe they're a service provider like myself, a podcast producer, maybe they have a product that they're marketing, selling. What is the next step? And are those the types of people you're working with?
Yeah, I would say most of our clients are startup to small and medium-sized businesses. We do have a couple of enterprise people that we work with, but they're not the norm for us, I would say. We have everything from folks in corporate that are starting side hustles to people who are launching brands for products that they've created and getting those out into the world, like the next big coffee brand kind of thing, right? So it's a good variety for us, and farms to fitness to fashion to all the things. If you're thinking about this, but you're not really sure what to do, I feel like Christine gave you some hints about LLC, and I said that was like my first step. I think the thing is just like getting yourself educated and deciding what is that next natural kind of step, right? It doesn't have to be a leap. It can just be a step, right? It doesn't have to be a jump. It can just be a step. We actually offer a free guide, Christine, if I can mention that, on the Jansel and Co website, on our homepage, or if you go to janselandco.com/free guide. And I've had this as my signature download that you can grab. And it's 3 things that every awesome website needs. And it's a great starting point because it gets you to start thinking about, okay, I want to start a business. I'm passionate about this thing, but like, now what? So it really breaks it down to talk about doing some inner thinking about who's your ideal client, who's the person that would want to receive that product or service that you have. And it's for both. What is the product that you want to offer, and what are its features and benefits? And like all the things, are some little exercises in there that will help you actually come to all of these conclusions. And then obviously how to get that out to market. So there's some really cool things that'll get you thinking before you even get to the technology. Like we can help you with that. We could talk about platforms and like all the things. But I think a lot of times when people get into business, they're worried about what technology and what website and all the things. And I'm like, no, baby steps first. We need to be thinking about what is it we're offering? Who is it we're offering to? What are the ways that's going to be received? And then we can start to think about allowing the technology to power that. So it's like a little reverse engineering there, but that'd be a great place for people to start.
That's really helpful. That was actually going to be one of my questions. So you already answered it. So I think that a lot of folks, and I'm including myself in this. So when we started on this journey, or about to start on the journey, you take all the courses and you sign up for the programs. And in those programs, of course, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a good thing, they recommend certain systems or whatever. And then you can get into that modality of, okay, I got to get this system, paying for these systems. And then you're not really ready for that. So you start paying for these systems and you don't really maybe know how to set them up, and not even to that detail. But I think it's just, it doesn't need to be that first step, like you just said. So I'm just reiterating what you said. So what I heard you say was, it doesn't need to be the first thing. So I don't need to go out and get Shopify or Kajabi. A good place to start, and we'll put it in the show notes, is your guide that you've put together a while ago, but you said it's your signature guide. Like, this is where you can start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important for people to hear that because there's so many flashy things out there. And there's a lot of these companies that do a really good job at their marketing. And hey, these tools are actually really amazing too, right? Like, I promote them. My nickname is the Shopify Queen. I'm not paid by them, by the way, but it's just, there are a lot of things that can really help you. But I think until you really take the time to spend on thinking about what that product is and who you're selling it to and all those things, a lot of times people come to us because they're like, it's not working. And then we start to ask some questions about who's the ideal client and what is the product and like, how can you use it? And like, why did you start that? And like, why is that important to you? And like all the things. Like, these seem like really simple questions, but if you're not clear on those things, like I always say, a confused eye doesn't buy. That could be because your website's confusing. It could be because your social media doesn't make sense. It could be a lot of things. But what it often is that the person who's trying to sell the thing isn't clear first. And so if you're not clear, that's the energy you're going to put out there. People are going to start to feel that. And you'll hear that in a lot of programs, a lot of coaches, whether they work in sales or they're going to talk to you about the tech or they're going to do whatever. These are some of the basic fundamentals I think are really important that often get missed because we just dive headfirst in. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think just doing a little bit of research first will go a long way.
So my last question for you today is, what is next for Sarah?
Yeah, I think the most immediate things that I've been doing, and obviously you're along for this journey, and here I am on this podcast spouting it from the rooftops. So certainly we're going to continue to help companies build, brand, and grow themselves and be awesome at what they do. There's lots of cool things that I could nerd out on the tech side that we're thinking with AI and like a bunch of different things, right? So there's always cool things to keep us interested. But for me personally, I really feel it's some of the more intrinsic things that have been really important to me, like the communities that we're building, who I'm talking to on my podcast, on the I Created That podcast, and really cultivating some of these interesting entrepreneurs like yourself, Christine, and people that are out there that are building cool things, that are like investing in themselves, that are building things that I feel like the world needs to hear about. And then just really getting out there and talking to people about why I feel like it's important to act on some of your dreams and how we don't need to see ourselves being this or that. It could be both, and just inspiring people that if they feel like there's something on their heart, that they should take action on that. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that from me as things progress over the next few years.
Great. Nice. Thank you so much. So for everybody listening, we will include in the show notes all of Sarah's information in that download. You can start there. And if they have questions for you specifically, how should they reach out to you?
Yeah, Instagram is the place I hang out. You can find me at Sarah Jansel, or my company's at Jansel and Co. I'm also on LinkedIn, also on Facebook. I'm in all the places. Instagram just happens to be like my little fave spot that I tend to be the most. Or head on over to my website, janselandco.com. If you submit a contact form or anything like that, or you're just trying to figure out how to get in touch, it always comes to me. It does not go to a robot. As much as I love AI, that stuff doesn't go to a robot. Yeah. Don't be a stranger. Reach out. Let me know if you heard this podcast, because I'd love to make that voice message over to Christine.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciated you sharing your story and helping guide folks that are listening and wondering what next they can do. And I think what you suggested here is really impactful. And I so appreciate that. And I really appreciate you meeting with me and allowing my community to reach out to you and work with you directly, because you're just amazing. I just love you. I'm always reaching out to Sarah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.